Hello everyone, I hope you're all doing okay. Today I'm bringing you the setup of a new reading journal of a sort for my Reading Around the World challenge, and it's a bit funny when you watch the video because there's two distinctive parts and all the parts is at the end of the video. I started setting up that journal in December of 2024 and I finished it in December of 2025. I still want to do a few more pages at the end of the journal, but I'm not sure how I want to go about it yet, so it might be in a later video. So why do I need a new journal for a reading challenge? I have been doing this Reading Around the World challenge I set it up in my first reading journal, I think sometimes around 2012, and it only consists of a list of all the countries in the world and the titles I had read corresponding to those countries. But as my reading journals became more and more elaborate, I wanted to get more serious about it and to have more specific information. I wanted to see the covers of the books because sometimes the title alone did not remind me of what the book was about. I also wanted some maps. In the makeover I did for my second reading journal, I set up a spread for that challenge just with a map of the world, but I wanted to learn more specifically about some countries. The last thing I would like to have in this journal, and that I have yet to set up, would be to see my progress throughout the years, to see how many books from new countries I've read, and just little stats to see if I'm on track, because it's not something that I want to be like reading 100 books for each year, but I actually want to finish it in my lifetime, so I need to be, serious about it? I need to be serious about it? Is that what I mean to say? I'm not sure. But the first thing I needed to do was to set up a cover page. But in fact, this is the last thing I did for the journal, because when I started the journal, I kept the first page blank because I knew I wanted a cover page, but I didn't have the creative juices to do it. And I ended up doing it in December of 2025. For the cover, I wanted to do the same thing I've done with my reading journals, that is to say use a main sticker as the focal point, and I used a Marigona Sully sticker. I also put a bit of scrapbook paper as the background. It's a scrapbook paper I had bought at Michael's years ago, and I wanted to have some neutral stickers to go with it, and I thought that my own vintage stickers that are scans of actual Paris and Versailles postcards as well as ads from the 1910s would go really well with my spread. And it's such a relief to be able to use my own stickers because I know they're not AI. I know I've done the job of scanning actual 1911 newspapers and inherited from my great-great-grandparents. And the postcards I've collected by thrifting both in France and in Canada. So now, as you can see, I already had a map in the journal, and that's one of the first map I set up in 2024, but I didn't like the colors I had used. I found them too garish. I had used some Tombow markers that I had bought specifically for that purpose because I had seen all of the journal girlies using them, and I thought that they would be streak-free and have nice colors, but the way I got them to be streak-free was to go over the marker several times, and then it got to be slightly less streaky but super pigmented, and I didn't like it. I didn't want to throw away the journal, so I just took some scrapbook paper that I got at the paper exchange at my last scrapbook retreat. I then printed the maps on some sticker paper and cut around them off camera. What I had not realized when I was using that map is that New Zealand was not included for some reason, but I will realize it later and draw it on a scrap piece of sticker paper and add it to the spread. I had done the map of Europe as a test off camera to see if I liked the layout, and now I'm going to do Eurasia, and it's the exact same process as for the world map. What I've learned from sticking big pieces of scrapbook paper in journals is that using a glue tape is much more effective and seamless than a glue stick, because glue sticks will add a lot of moisture to your journal, and my pages are still wobbly from the last time I glued the maps in my journal, so it's a bit annoying for my perfectionist mentality. At first I thought to use my cutting machine so that I wouldn't have to fussy cut the maps, but the program would not recognize the very delicate outskirts of the maps, and it got to be so tedious to just do it on the computer, and I'd rather spend some time fussy cutting. I had done some headers when I first set up the journal for the continents. I had used some pretty washi tapes from Sostreno Greno and a creator I don't remember from the top of my head, but that will be in the description, and I still love those washi tapes, but I found that it was too much. One of the little challenges I had was that I didn't want to cut around all the tiny little islands that were on the maps, but some of them were big enough that I didn't want to have so much white on the page. I also wanted them to be positioned correctly, so I had to devise a method to be able to somehow know where to glue the little islands, and I don't even know how to explain it, but you've seen me doing it, and that's how I did it. I found those maps by typing the name of the region of the world I wanted to have, and also blank and coloring, and I added the name of the countries myself. I wrote them in French because that's what I wanted to do at the moment, and sometimes it takes me a bit to remember the names of some countries in English. What I would like to do in the future in the journal would be to add along the French names the original names for the countries so that I can learn more about it, because all I want to do with that journal is learn more about the countries I'm reading books from, because it's not only a challenge to tick off boxes. I don't just want to say I've read a book from each country in the world. I want to learn about that country. I want to know which language they speak there. I want to learn more about their history. Obviously, I can't become an expert in every country in the world, but I still want to learn as much as I can, so that would be great. And I also want to add more info about the countries, but I'm not sure how to add it to the journal, because I don't want it to become an encyclopedia either. Maybe that would be something for my commonplace book. I haven't figured that out yet. I'm now at the stage when I need to color in the countries I've read from, and this is a very satisfying process when you don't have to do it 72 million times on all the different maps at once. But once all my maps are up to date, I'll only have to do it for one country each time, so that's going to be much less annoying. And following the fact that I didn't like how streaky and how pigmented the Tombow markers were, I decided to use those Zig markers I had bought in France, and I have a limited selection of colors. I have this grey, a blue that on camera looks very similar to the grey, but that in person is a bit more different. So what I decided to do was to use those colors but have varying intensity for them, and I much prefer the result. The only thing that's a bit annoying is that I made a mistake. I was sure that a book I had read was from an author from Uganda, but in fact he's from Angola. So now I have to fix it. So maybe the quickest way to do it would be to read now a book from Uganda, so I can just switch out the covers and not have to try to erase what I've colored in on the map. I don't even know how I would do it. Maybe if I had to, I would try to cut out a bit of the sticker paper and put it over Uganda so that it would be blank right now, but I could color on it later. I had to come up with a technique so that my markers were not streaky on the paper, and the way I did it was to stop trying to draw in the countries with like straight lines on top of one another's. It had to be more organic and a bit more quickly. I still had to have several layers so the streaky marks disappeared, but all in all it was a very satisfying map to see at the end. Some countries were quite small, and especially when you're around Europe or Southeast Asia, it's a bit difficult to see what you have on such a broad map. That's why I wanted to have several smaller maps after that. The mistake I made was that when I went over the names of the countries on the other map with the markers, they kind of smudged, and I'm not a fan of the result. You'll see what it looks like in the the following clips, but I'm thinking about a way to have the name of the countries be more clean. I was thinking maybe I could print the names of the country on the sticker paper and put them over the name of the countries that are already there so that it's a bit more clean looking. But I'm not sure if I want to get into this already. I hope this video is not too monotonous because I'm basically doing the same thing, gluing down maps, coloring maps, and then writing down names of countries and pasting the covers of the books. But I'm so happy about that journal because it's been so useful to me in the past year. And what I would also like to have at the end of the journal would be a list of potential reads, because it takes a bit of time and research to find the next read you want from a country, because you need to see if it's available through the library, if there's an ebook available, if it's not too expensive. I would like to have my research for that in one place. We're now back in December of 2024 and I had decorated my desk for Christmas and I think it's pretty cute. What I'm doing right now is write down the name of the countries, and I had written them down first with a pencil to make sure I would not miss any country and have to add them later. But I ended up forgetting some names of countries despite the fact I was copying a complete list of countries in the world, but that's how it is. And I wanted to have enough space between countries so it would have several covers, but also not too much that the journal would not have enough pages. I said at the beginning of the video, I don't just want to read one book per country, I want to learn about the country, but I also want to read more than one book. I want to read classics, I want to read indigenous authors, so that's why I sometimes have several book covers per country. And especially when you have countries that are so varied and widespread or with different cultural groups, I would like to have several books for that. For example, for the UK, I would like to have a book for Northern Ireland, Scotland, Wales, England. I obviously want to have a book for the Republic of Ireland. Some countries are easier than others because I know some stuff about them and I won't know where to start. But if you've read any books from any countries you've seen I haven't discovered yet, or even that I have discovered yet but you think I should read because they'll teach me about the country, please tell me in the comment. I've been thinking about creating this master list that I would share with you and that would be filled with books in both French and English that I would have checked out for their availability and for people's recommendations, so that it would be easier in the future for other people and for me to find their next read. I am now not in sync anymore with what I had written down on the notebook, but I still didn't want to erase everything in advance because it still gave me an indication to where I was. I think I had forgotten 2 or 3 countries for some reason, and yeah, it was a bit nerve-wracking because I didn't want my journal to be ugly, but in the end, every time I try to do a perfect journal and I prepare everything and I use pencil, I always mess up and it's frustrating, but at the same time, it also makes it easier to work in the journal and to make it less stressful to write in it because it's not perfect anymore, so you might as well use it and not be worried about messing up. This was a very satisfying part of the setup. Pasting the book covers was so nice because I could see the progress I had made. I could envision more clearly where I was and what I wanted to read next. Sometimes it's hard to know where to start, which country should I read next if you don't have anything in mind. And the way I've gone about it is to see which spreads are almost complete, and I decided to read next from those countries. And I think the next country I will read from is Jamaica, because I think on the spread where it is, I'm only missing 2 countries. So it's just going to be satisfying to have a complete spread because it's not happened yet in this journal. I also added under the book covers when I had read them, and it's funny because some books I read all the way back to the 2000s to 2010s, and it's just fun to see my progression. Sometimes I go back and forth between pages I've already done because I missed a cover, and one of the tips I have to discover books from different countries is reading short story collections, because you can discover several authors at the same time, different point of views on their country. And there's a collection in English I really like which is called A City in Short Action, and I read the Book of Gaza in it and it was great. There's also a collection in French by Magellan, which I really like. I have read from them short story from Peru and from Iceland and from Senegal. And if they were easier to get here in Canada, I would get them. I really want to read the Cuba short story collection by A City in Short Action. And there was also the Taiwan, I think I was interested in. So yeah, I have a lot of things on my wish list, and those books are not really available in my network of libraries. So I either have to buy them on my e-reader or order them directly from the publishers. And here it is. This was the setup of my Reading the World Challenge journal. I hope you liked it and gave you some ideas about some books you could read, or about also doing a Reading the World Challenge. If you've done a Reading the World Challenge already, tell me how you've set it up in the comments. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!